So thank you for inviting me. Thanks. I know Gemma reached out to ask if I would share something, and this is I actually am um, giving kind of a refreshed version of a talk that we did in the KGG recently for a learning moment. And that was really talking about what it means to create a challenge when you're in a leadership position. So I work for a company called Genie Industries, and in this picture you can see the basket of a boom lift doing some work on the spine of someone. But those boom lifts and scissor lifts, those kind of big industrial construction aerial work platform products, are what we build at our organization, and been there for a long time, 21 years. So I've spent all of my career in manufacturing, and my background, my training in university is industrial engineering. So I'm very much kind of a process thinker, process orientation. Naturally, that's how I've been trained to think. And I did get some exposure to Kata in the early years because I was lucky enough to have a relationship with Julie Simmons and the group that she led at the time that Jennifer Ayers now leads, the Northwest High Performance Consortia group that's based out of the Portland, Oregon area. And they did a lot of early work with Mike. So I had some exposure to Kata in the very early stages, practiced for a while, and then took on some different roles in my business. And so I was out of practice for a bit and then have come back in as a member of the Kata Girl Geeks community in the last year here, and knocked the rust off of myself in terms of my learning, my skills as a learner and my skills as a coach. But one of the things that I hear often in my role, I'm a senior director. I'm moving into a new role leading global customer experience. And I hear a lot of people say, well, if our leader would just be clear about what our objective is, or if the leader would just do that. And I'm like, well, I'm the leader. So, and what is my role as the leader when it comes to Kata, and how do I need to be really intentional about this as I go forward? So before I get into kind of sharing the talk, the guts of the talk, I wanted to start with that. Like, what is the role of the leader? And not necessarily just in terms of Kata, but if you're a leader in an organization, what is your role? And I would say that I think part of a leader's core role is to frame the issue or objective that you're trying to work through or achieve, pose questions and engage their team to determine how to execute forward to achieve that. I think that's a core role of a leader. So today I'm going to talk about Kata and creating a challenge in Kata as a leader. So I think most people on this call are probably familiar with the Toyota Kata culture book. And this is something that I really looked at referencing as I was looking forward at my focus on how do I create a challenge in my organization as a leader. And I think a lot of times we get caught up in the discussions that we have in our practice around learning the Kata pattern. But I think when we step back and look at the intent behind the Toyota Kata culture book, it's not just about learning the Kata. That is part of it, but there is an aspect of striving towards your objectives for your organization that's key. And so I think when we think about being in a leadership role and having to create a challenge and then deploy it through an organization, you have to remember it's not just the challenge statement, right? Your strategy and direction and vision has to be good. There has to be good thought and good work that goes into that. That's the pre-work that leads up to a good challenge statement. So it's not enough to have, a good challenge. The strategy that's connected to has to be solid. So when you're in your role as a leader, the first thing is really making sure that you have a clear understanding of where the organization needs to be successful. And that's where it really starts. And then once you've grasped that, that's where you start getting into now, how do we connect that vision to the challenge for our different pieces of the organization that we're responsible for? And how do we communicate that clearly? And I think that's the piece that often gets missed, is that clear communication. And so when we talk about creating, or when I talk about here, creating a challenge statement, I need to know that that's clearly describing that aspirational picture of where we need to be as an organization, a specific date in the future, including the behaviors and how we're going to measure success as we go forward. So even if you have the authority as a leader, developing that high level challenge and deploying it through your entire organization, it's not easy. It's not easy. It's not a simple thing. So how do we do that? So in my world, this is kind of the very high level. This is what we're working towards, or the theory behind how we would deploy challenges throughout the organization. So in the top left, you can see a wheel image, and that is actually our strategy as a business. And so we, as a part of that strategic work, we do all the things that you would think of, right? We dig in, we understand the market, we understand the, macroeconomics, the direction, the competitive landscape, how do we need to position ourselves as a business? So we get really clear about that strategy and direction. Where I come into it as a senior director is that then that strategy gets cascaded to the different parts of the organization, and I have to convert that strategy into kind of a 3-year department level strategic statement. And so that's this middle top example. So I have to come up with high level, what is the vision for my organization over the next 3 years, aligned to that overall strategy and vision. And then, of course, each year I have to look at, because we use very classical people management tools with, cascaded KPIs and objectives. And so I have to look at, okay, what are my objectives that the vice president that I report into is going to measure my success on? And then how is that going to tie into my team? So there's work that we do as a team to align across my peer group underneath my leader on kind of high level objectives. And then that's the point at which I start to think about, how do I make a challenge statement for my organization? So once I know what those are, I'm able to go into grasping the current condition and establishing a next target condition that is my current condition and my target condition against my objectives as a leader that I'm responsible for. Then I have to figure out, kind of back to the orange book, now, okay, if that's my challenge statement, how do I break that down and cascade that challenge into, or cascade my next target condition into challenges for each one of the managers that I'm responsible for in my organization, so that they come to it. I don't want to be the leader that somebody comes to, one of the Cascadia or KGG meetings and goes, well, my leader doesn't give me clear objectives. I would be like, wow, that was a failed experiment. I got to go back to the drawing board if one of my managers comes and says something like that. So that's a huge part of what I take my target condition, which I look at on a quarterly basis, and then say, okay, how do I phrase a challenge for each one of those managers for the next quarter? And then they're going to break that down into target conditions. And then we, of course, have our kind of daily, weekly, monthly management system cycles that we follow, where we're feeding back to each other through our system what's happening. So my challenge started with the phrase at the bottom of this, which is, wouldn't it be wonderful if I had a systematic way to develop leaders and mobilize creative capability across my organization that enabled us to achieve all of our objectives? So this was my original kind of starting place for my challenge. Then, of course, because I am a good learner and I do practice what I preach when it comes to Kata, the first thing I thought about was, oh my gosh, what is the operating pattern that I'm striving? Like, what am I actually trying to achieve here? That, those high level documents and those things that go back and forth, that's all great. But like, what's my block diagram look like as I work towards this? And so this was what I started with. I said, okay, I think what I'm trying to do, my hypothesis is I have to start by reviewing and agreeing to my annual goals and objectives with my vice president. And then I have to develop that first challenge statement for the year. And that's kind of the building up my challenge statement. And then once I have that, then I have to grasp the current condition. I have to set that next target condition, break that down for each direct report, develop a challenge statement for each of them, review and agree to that with them. And then, of course, we finally get into the execution phase where we're going through the normal practice. And then I thought about, well, what process characteristics do I want to see happening in this process? And I want to make sure that, current condition and target condition align with our overall department metrics and our monthly operation cycles, because we have a very solid Hoshin and, management system process. I wanted to make sure that the ways of working were agreed upon by all the parties. That's something we talk about in the KGG a lot, is when you become a part of a cohort, you are agreeing to a certain way of working. And I love that concept. And so I wanted to bring that into my management team. So, including things like documenting coaching cycles, capturing micro learnings, those elements that I've learned can be really powerful in helping people kind of exponentially grow in their learning. Making sure they're using storyboards and, recording coaching cycles in a story form. So this was kind of where I started. And this was what I presented to the KGG of, my hypothesis of how I was going to create this cycle. And so what I'd like to share with you guys now is actually my storyboard, because I am working on this Kata challenge right now. So hopefully you can still see my screen and you see the storyboard. Yes. Okay. All right, so I'm zoomed out right now so you can kind of see the whole board, but I'll walk you guys through this so you can see it up close. And forgive if I get clumsy as I navigate, it's a little challenging. So my refreshed version of my challenge statement, when I kind of came away and started thinking about how do I make sure that this is really capturing the intent of what I'm trying to do, is wouldn't it be wonderful if by December 31st, 2022, I have a systematic way to develop leaders and mobilize creative capability across my organization so that the members of my organization improve their morale while meeting all of our objectives measured by, and here you can see I've got a placeholder because I'm in the midst of agreeing to the specific measures with my boss. So it'd be measured by kind of the high level KPIs and outcome metrics that will be defined here shortly. So once I have those, I will update my challenge statement so that I can add those specific elements in. So that is my current challenge statement. And right now, the focus process that I'm working on is we have a monthly commercial operation. So I'm part of the commercial organization. So we have a monthly commercial operations meeting that occurs. And right now, me and my peers and my boss, we are all working on the 2022 version of what's going to be reviewed in that monthly operating cycle, which speaks to our key metrics and our key objectives, because those are the things we talk about in that meeting each month. So my target condition, which I missed my date this week, but by December 10th, 2021, there was an operating pattern that I expected to be in place. And for the sake of time, I won't talk through the whole thing because it'll take me over. But essentially, that would lead me to having my slide templates ready for January, excluding the refreshed data from the end of December. And so this was what was agreed upon with my peers of the slides that I'm supposed to have and the metrics that I'm supposed to have these slides prepared for. And I had some process metrics around, having the slides having their KPIs defined, the Pareto details for breakdown of issues that are on each slide, and then kind of the top 3 actions and of course my operating pattern. So where I am right now is very, very close. Really my gap is just these last couple of steps in the target condition of getting the full feedback and alignment. So I've gotten quite a ways here. And again, for time, I won't go through the entire operating pattern, but you can see down below, I've got my examples of the outcome for me is the slide template being prepared minus that data. So I've got my on-time delivery slide, my service level slide. I've got a note here, review and align, but you can see I've got that together. And then if we had time, I could talk you through, what are the experiments I've been running as I attempt to put this together and the obstacles that I've hit on the way. But what I can say is that it's been amazing taking this sort of intentful approach of deploying the goals through my team. And part of my experiments has been working with my managers and having these catchball conversations to get their input early in the process. And already one of the great learnings I've had is that does actually make them feel more engaged, and their morale has already improved. It's a new organization that I'm taking over, just by sharing this with them. So I literally walk them through my storyboard and I share where I'm at. And then they know that they're a part of my experiments because I'm trying to refine a specific metric and determine if this is what should be proposed for the slide. And so the act of being able to engage them in that discussion and being able to externalize my thought process to my leaders has been already hugely empowering for them. Because literally my brain is on paper here. So they can see exactly how I'm breaking things down. And I know that, often when we're in a learning role, we do that for our coach. But I guess one of my key lessons in applying this has been that also works very well for anyone that you're trying to engage in the process. That ability to sort of be really specific and externalize your thoughts is powerful for sharing with anyone that you're trying to share with, not just for your coach. So that's where I'm at in terms of the challenge of creating a challenge and deploying it through an entire organization. And I'm going to keep working on this year and learning as I go. And thanks for letting me share my story with you today.